Good morning. This morning I'm turning to a psalm, Psalm 121. Such a familiar psalm, but such comforting and strengthening words. I lift up my eyes to the hills. From whence does my help come? My help comes from the Lord, who made heaven and earth. He will not let your foot be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. Behold, he who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade on your right hand. The sun shall not smite you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all evil. He will keep your life. The Lord will keep your going out and your coming in from this time forth and forevermore. I lift up my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? It's a good question, really. The psalmist starts with a question. It's all right to ask questions. It's all right to ask questions. I know there have been times in my life when I have felt overwhelmed by circumstances and wondered what on earth I could do. And going by my feelings, which we shouldn't do, I felt that God wasn't there. I was fortunate enough to come to faith when I was 14. So I knew the Lord. But it's possible to know the Lord and to have times when things are happening in your life and you can't feel his presence. And you pray and you ask him for help and it doesn't feel like he's there. And on those times I've been fortunate enough to be within reach of the coast. And I would go and overlook the sea. Now the bit of sea we overlook anywhere in England is not a very big sea, but it looks big from the beach. And looking at the sea and seeing the vastness of the ocean. And perhaps on a windy day, seeing the waves rising, beating against the sea wall and so on, seemed to help me to get things into proportion, to realise that actually my problems, my troubles are not that big really, not compared to the size of the world, and not compared to the troubles other people have. And I think perhaps for the psalmist here, when he looked for something that would get his life into proportion, he looked at the most majestic things in his world, and that was the hills. Looking at the landscape, looking up at the hills, those towering, immovable, amazing pieces of creator architecture. And then to discover that help doesn't come from there. I didn't get help from the ocean. You don't get help from the hills. You just get your vision readjusted, I suppose. And it's good to recognise that my help comes from the Lord, who made heaven and earth. We look at the ocean, look at the hills, they're created things. Greater than them is the creator of all, the Lord who made heaven and earth and the stars and the galaxies and the universe. The God we serve is the biggest ever. Bigger than we can ever imagine, greater than we can ever imagine. His power and majesty far beyond anything we can even envisage. We can never fathom his greatness, never fathom his ability to do things. But we worship him for who he is, the creator, and yet the psalmist is able to say, he will not let your foot be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. Even though God is the creator of all things, he cares for you and for me. And he's watching out for us to make sure we don't slip, to make sure that we don't move out of the path, the way of life that's laid before us. He who keeps you will not slumber. He doesn't slumber or sleep. So on those nights when you're awake in the middle of the night, going over things, you can't sleep for those thoughts that keep filling your head, God is awake with you. He doesn't sleep. You're not going to disturb him if you speak to him in the night, because he doesn't sleep. You might not ring a friend and wake them at 3 a.m. because you've woken up, something has happened and you can't sleep. But you won't be disturbing God because he doesn't slumber or sleep. And he's there for you, whether you feel it or not. And this is quite a hard thing for us who live our entire life through the senses, the 5 senses. To know that God is there even when we feel nothing. We sense nothing. We know he's there. Why do we know he's there? Because he is there. Because he promised he would never leave us nor forsake us. And if we live by his promises, we deny the lie that is our feelings. Because the enemy would make us believe that God has abandoned us, forgotten us. We slipped his mind. He's busy elsewhere. Lies, lies, and yet more lies. Not for nothing was Jesus called Emmanuel, God with us. The whole purpose of God was to dwell among men, to find a place where he could dwell. And through Jesus he has made it possible for God himself, in the person of his Spirit, to dwell in us. So the lie is, he's not there. He doesn't notice. He's asleep. The truth is, he's in us. He's with us. He will help us. He doesn't sleep. Read it again if you've got time today. Psalm 121. Be blessed today, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.